I'll just take you guys through the major changes that has happened with the upgradation from version 5.1 to version 6, right? It's been a year since the transition has happened, as in there was a timeline of 1 year given for the transition to happen. And from April 1st, 2024, the version 6 is what is applicable, okay? So I think I can skip this, and then I know it's just the team who's there, right? So it's just about understanding awareness about what are the new changes that has happened in FSSC version 6. I hope everybody here understands saying what does FSSC version 6 or FSSC consist of, right? So if we have to look at the evolution that has happened, 2010 is when, the version 1, the first time it was laid out, just having the food manufacturing as the scope in the FSSC. Version 2 happened with the packaging. Version 3 happened with feed animal farming and quantity. Version 4 happened in 2016, wherein transport, retail, and catering was added. The version 5 was a major change, wherein ISO 22000 2005 was upgraded to ISO 22000 2018 requirements. So ISO 22000 is one part of FSSC 22000, hence a major change or major shift had uh, taken up. Version 5.1, a small, multi-site certification, product design development, and food safety culture was added to the additional requirements. And similarly for version 6, if you look at the major changes are in your additional requirements, right? The other parts of your FSSC stays the same. There are no changes in that. So why did we have to do that? Okay, the major thing is FSSC is a GFSI certified recognized standard. So while you are GFSI recognized, you have to make sure you meet the requirements of 22003-1 2022. So to incorporate the requirements or change in what ISO 22003-1 had, FSSC version 6 was the need of the hour, right? Wherein the sustainable developments have been strengthened. There is a new, additional certificate. If you're having FSSC 22000, you can also parallelly apply for FSSC 24000 as well. There were little editorial changes and amendments, which is the part of the continuous improvement for any standard that has been incorporated in this. So now about the scheme, if you look at, right, so this was what it was earlier, the scheme overview, requirements for organization to be audited, requirements for the certification body, requirements for the certification body has come twice, the requirements for accreditation bodies. And there was definitions and normative references. Wherein now, if you look at, instead of 2 annexures, which was there earlier, we have 5 annexures, which has been added. Okay, the scope statement saying how do you put it, what do you include, the audit report requirements, the certificate templates, the accreditation certificates, and also saying like when the certifying bodies are conducting these audits, what type of information and communication technologies can be used and how to be used. So these are the new annexures. Instead of the 2 annexures, there are these 5 annexures which has been added on. Now moving to your audit requirements for FSSC, right? There are 3 parts to it. Okay, so the first part, the major part, is the ISO 22000. All the clauses that has been mentioned in ISO 22000 has to be complied with. So now there are PRP gaps. Now where do I go and search, the PRP requirements? Because ISO 22000 doesn't talk about the PRP requirements. So there are sector specific TS, that is your technical specifications, which is available. If you do not have the technical specifications, then there's something called a pass, which can be referred to. But then there are these sector specific TS requirements which are there, which needs to be met based on the unit or the business that you are handling, whether it is a manufacturing or a catering or a storage transport, right? So based on that, they have the requirements that has been outlined, which can be met. And the third part, which the ISO and the TS doesn't meet as per GFSI requirement, and additional requirements have been put together so that whatever the requirement is there as per 22003-1, everything gets covered. So these are your three parts of FSSC, or any, FSSC, I would say, the standard itself, right? So the changes keeps happening depending on what the change is. We will be discussing about FSSC 22000, the additional requirements, because that's the major part where the changes have happened. Now, before we go into that, right, there is something called a scope. There are few shuffles that has happened in the scope itself, right? There used to be something called animal category type of thing, which has been completely removed now. The farming of animals for meat, milk, eggs, and honey, that was one of the scope which has been removed and has been clubbed in other places, right? So that is the change, major change, I would say, that has happened in the scope. Now, moving to additional requirements. Earlier, we had 15 requirements as per version 5.1. Right now, we have 18 requirements. The management of service and purchased material. This is the first requirement. Has anything changed? No, there was this requirement earlier as well, which we had it. The only thing what they have emphasized right now is that all your services that you are taking, it can be the lab services, right? Mostly they have emphasized on the lab services, because you send a lot of your products to analyze in the lab, and if your lab is not competent enough, you are into a problem. So that is where the management of your services and your purchase materials, especially your emergency purchases, because ISO 22000 does talk about your vendor management, but here are mostly your emergency purchases, right? And also something which has been added here mainly is for your packaging material. How are you going to handle the use of your recycled packaging if it is coming as a raw material input into the production of your finished packaging material, right? So you need to, as a packaging industry, if you are into packaging, printing or making of the packaging material, you need to make sure that is being taken care of. So that is an additional requirement which has come in. The next one is product labeling and printed materials. So this is again something which was already there. This is not a new requirement. But then what has been added, saying like whenever there is a claim on your label, on your product, right, which has been made, you have to make sure as an organization, you have the validation of the supporting claims that you have made, which was not there, right? And not only the validation, but you also have to make sure the verification is in place, including your traceability, your mass balance, and all of those. Okay, so that is something which is there. Apart from that, in this, there is also a requirement that has been put across, saying that whenever you have your printed material coming in, right, there needs to be a control over your printed material. There has to be a system of approval. There has to be a system of managing your artwork. There has to be an approval of print run against the agreed standard. There has to be, a process to ensure effective segregation is been done between different print variants. And also the accountability of any unused printed material. So that's the second, requirement, in which there are few more additional requirements which has been added on. Food defense, that was there earlier, nothing new about it, but it was not described, more in detail. Now it used to say just conduct food defense assessment or have a plan for it, but now they clearly saying like it has to be documented as well, right? So that is something which has been put in place for the food defense out there. The another one is your food fraud mitigation. This again existed in 5.1. Again, the same thing out here, similar to the food defense. The food fraud needs to be documented, and appropriate mitigation plans needs to be in place that covers the processes and products within the scope of the organization. Logo use, there's nothing different on the logo use. It's all the same. The only thing that they have, there are requirements where you can use the logo of FSSC and where you can't use the logo. Additional thing that they have added is for your COAs, no more logos can be used. If you're using it, it's a violation of the norms. Management of allergens, right? So that is something which we already basically have it in some of the other form in ISO 22000 and PRP, but it's not called out very clearly. So this is something wherein a detailed process has been put in, okay, wherein you have to make sure a proper allergen management, and how are you managing it, where are you putting your precautionary warning labels? Is that okay to put? If you have a robust system of no cross contamination, then there is no requirement of putting a precautionary label as well, right? Everyone who is handling the allergens needs to be trained. That's another additional requirement which has been put in place. Your allergen management needs to be reviewed on an annual basis. And also, when do you do it? Annual basis, yes, but you can do it more often in case there are any significant changes in terms that affects your food safety, a public recall, a product withdrawal, or anything of that similar nature. The another one comes in as an environmental monitoring. So this existed in the earlier version as well, right? Just that few things have been added in this, saying like when you are doing, the environmental monitoring, you need to have a system of reviewing the effectiveness, saying like whether that environment is suitable or is that contaminating your product in any way, right? At least annually, you need to make sure environmental monitoring system has been done. If in case you're not getting any positive results over a long period of time, then you need to be worried about it. You need to know what is it happening. You need to make sure trend is done, and your trends are, if out of your specification, you need to make sure why are those, and also ensure systems are put back in place. Whenever there are alerts, recalls, or withdrawals, you have to make sure the environmental monitoring program is re-looked at. Now, this is a new input out here. Okay, this is a new requirement: food safety and quality culture. The culture is something you cannot assess it or cannot mark it. It's like, when somebody walks in, they can feel the new trend, as they say, the vibe of the place, right? So it's basically saying, like, how do you feel? You stand there and you can observe there, and then you can see, say, what type of culture the organization have, right? So it's important that the culture is being assessed, proper communication is being done to cultivate a positive food safety and quality culture. While you are doing that, you have to make sure you address at a minimum a good communication, proper training. There should be a system of taking the employee feedback, engaging with the employee, and also measuring the performances throughout your organization. And there has to be an objective after you just do a culture assessment. You can't just leave it like that, but then there has to be a process of assessing, saying like where are we standing today and what are our plans or objectives to achieve better. The next one is again a new requirement. Quality control was nowhere been spoken about. Okay. So this one says, saying like, please make sure you have a proper quality control over the products which you are, doing it. You need to make sure you establish, implement, and maintain a quality policy and quality objectives. You can just say, saying like doing it right the first time, right? Or how many deviations. So, what type of planning do you have for your quality control? That is important. You need to make sure you have the procedures written down, which includes unit, weight, volume. Everything should be established and implemented, that the products which you are, going to dispatch or making in your organization meets the applicable consumer and legal requirements. This should also include um, all the equipments that you have are calibrated and verified so that there are no deviations out there. There has to be a procedure written down so that the line startup and changeover procedures are established and implemented to ensure products are meeting the requirement. The next one is transport, storage, and warehousing. Earlier in the version 5.1, we just had storage and warehousing. So, transport is something which gets added to this one. And specifically, the transport is added for the vehicles which transports food as it is. Like, any examples that you want to give, or anything that the team wants to say, saying what type of vehicles are used wherein the food is directly into the vehicle? Anybody? No one? Where do you use the transport vehicle where the food is directly into uh, the product is directly touching the vehicle itself? Any product which gets transported? No? Nobody wants to speak? The tankers that we use for milk, for water, lot of products, the dry products like your maida and all of those, right? So you need to make sure these transport vehicles, if you're using it, they have a good plan in place, the cleaning procedures, the clearance procedures, all of those. And also, if it has been outsourced, you have given that logistic part to a partner, you need to make sure the service agreement includes all of the requirements that is there as per your product that is getting handled. Hazard control and measure for preventive cross contamination. This is nothing new. It's been there, right? So only few things has been added to it, saying like there has to be a risk assessment to determine the need and type of foreign body detection equipment, whether you need a metal detector, whether you need a magnet, or whether you need a X-ray machine, right? A documented procedure needs to be in place for managing and use of the equipment selected. Next one is your PRP verification. So nothing changes in this. It's the same one. On the product design and development, the design is something, a product design. So product and development was there. The design is something, the word gets added to it Rest, nothing major changes in that. Only thing, if you have a ongoing self-life verification or not, that is what you need to define based on the frequency of the risk that is involved. If you have a ready to cook product, right, the cooking instructions, if you're writing it down, you have to make sure that is validated. That's something which has been added. Rest of them stays the same. The health status stays the same. Nothing's been changed in that. Equipment management is a new line item which gets added, saying that all the equipments, what you are going to have or what you are having, you need to make sure the specifications, the purchase specifications of all your equipments are in place and it meets the hygienic design, applicable legal and customer requirements. Food loss and waste is again a new line item which has been added to it. Okay, so the loss is something which happens during your production, and the waste is something after you have produced it. Maybe for whatsoever reason you're not able to consume that. So what do you do? Is there a process? How do you minimize the waste that has been generated? Your surplus products or byproducts which are intended as animal feed or food to prevent contamination of these products. So you need to have a documented policy and objectives, right, around food loss and waste. The next one is a communication requirement. We all know that we need to communicate well with our suppliers, with our legal entities, with our vendors, with our clients, everything. But something which was not called out, it was understood but not called out anywhere, saying in case there are any serious events that impacts your food safety management system, you need to make sure your certification integrity is not at risk. Okay, your certifying bodies are communicated about those challenges which are there. And the last one is about the requirements for organization with multi-site certification. If you have a central function, right, how do you handle that central function and how do you handle the internal audits of different premises? That is something which has been spoken in this one. So if you look at, there were 15 requirements. Now we have 18 requirements which is there. So you have multiple of them which gets added. Your quality control, food loss and waste, and communication are three which gets added as a new requirement. Rest all of them were pretty much there. Just the amendment has happened. So these are your five, new ones which gets added, right? They have removed few of them. So food safety and quality culture, quality control, equipment management, food loss and waste, communication requirements. So these are five which gets added to this new additional requirement. So that's all from me, right? If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask and I would be happy to reply.
Any questions from anyone?